Ambassador Gabriel, welcome to 17 TV. We're pleased to have you with us tonight. First of all, allow me to say that we're happy to know that you have been nominated by President Biden to serve as a member of the United States Institute for Peace. Can you explain the mission of the Institute and what kind of peace do you like to achieve in the Middle East?
Sure. Rula, it's a great honor that the president has asked me to serve on the board of directors of the United States Institute of Peace. It requires a Senate confirmation. So I'm not quite on the board yet. It's really up to the Senate to decide. Hopefully that'll occur soon. But the U.S. Institute of Peace was created by an act of Congress to bring out alternative thinking to international affairs beyond the military equation. Sometimes it does involve military solutions in their study, but generally to bring peaceful and alternative ways to settle conflicts around the world.
Very good. And talking about peace and military intervention, now that the talks in Vienna are going on, do you think that they could achieve something peaceful, or should we expect a military intervention to force the Iranians to stop the nuclear process?
Well, as reported in the press, it looks like there's a real difficult process in the negotiations between the United States, headed by Rob Malley for the United States, and the Iranians. Remember President Biden, when he campaigned early in his tenure, he said, we want to make any deal with Iran stronger and longer. And what he meant by that is he wanted to make sure not only did they go back to the JCPOA, but in fact, they dealt with terrorism proxies in the region, which would include Hezbollah, of course, and missile technology questions. So they have a very difficult process ahead of them. I might say this, I think it's in Iran's interest to find a way forward to close a deal with the United States, because in the end, the United States cannot afford to have Iran get a nuclear weapon. And so the alternatives become less and less the more they won't negotiate. So we have to be hopeful. But what's important for the American Task Force on Lebanon, which, as you know, Rula, I head up, we have to make sure that in any negotiation that it goes beyond JCPOA alone, and we have to make sure that terrorism proxies are dealt with by Iran. It's really one of the most important things we could be doing in terms of a U.S.-Lebanon policy.
Perfect, which means that no matter what happens in Vienna, you promise that through ATFL, you will work very hard not to allow Iran to get Lebanon as a prize.
So we've known each other a long time, so I'm going to be very candid with you. I promise you that I will work day and night. This is my passion to help the U.S.-Lebanon relationship. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to guarantee any outcomes. So we will work very hard to make sure the administration realizes that they're doing a very good job when it comes to policies regarding Lebanon, but they need to make sure that in these policies are included regional aspects of diplomacy, including the Iran deal. So our work is cut out for us. I think we have a Congress that understands this as well. And we have a Biden administration that wants to make sure that Lebanon is strengthened through this process, not weakened. But
because otherwise, like on one hand, the U.S. administration calls Hezbollah a terrorist group along with 46 countries that followed the footsteps of Washington. And how could they ever think of giving Lebanon to Hezbollah's grip if they consider this group as a terrorist?
So, Rula, let me be clear about something. the fact that we're negotiating with Iran, first and foremost on nuclearization, doesn't mean that we're giving Hezbollah to them. Yeah, that's very important. I'm glad you brought this up. Nowhere in the negotiation are they giving Iran a free hand with Hezbollah. That is not in the cards. It's not in the discussions. The question is, how far can they go in these discussions to tie their hands when it comes to terrorism proxies? So that's the question that we've got to grapple with. But by closing a JCPOA part of the Iran deal does not mean that somehow we're weakening Lebanon's ability to deal with Hezbollah or the United States and its allies to deal with Hezbollah. Hopefully it will be stronger. But like I said, our work is cut out for us. This is probably our most difficult task for ATFL right now.
Let me tell you something. Hezbollah cannot rule Lebanon as such. They don't have the grip over the 30% of the Shia in Lebanon. They represent a big chunk of them, whether by money, by force. They are in the political life of Lebanon. We cannot undermine their presence. However, they're part of, or the reason why Lebanon collapsed today. The collapse that we are witnessing should have happened a long time ago. What happened is that the Arab countries are no longer willing to lend Lebanon any money, like unconditionally, because of Hezbollah's doing in Yemen and elsewhere. So, like today, the Iranian deal would take into consideration also the good relations between the U.S. and the Gulf countries.
So,
that's a question for you. Are you
okay? So you refer to Hezbollah as part of the political fabric of the country. Let me say this: they should act it then. If they care about Lebanon, they should put Lebanon first. What are they doing in Syria? What are they doing in Yemen? What are they doing in these other countries?
In Iraq.
And all in Iraq. And also, why are they stymieing the ability for the country to move forward on a negotiation with an IMF plan? Why are they stymieing the negotiations on the maritime border? Why are they not allowing Judge Bitar to do his job? These are things that, if in fact they're part of the political fabric of the country, they should act like they put Lebanon first rather than Iran and other countries. So our message to people in that regard would be, help your country. And the Lebanese have to stand up to anybody who puts other interests ahead of their own country. To the political leadership of Lebanon, they must stand up. And they must stand up to any political group that doesn't put Lebanon first and the Lebanese people first.
What I meant to tell you is that Hezbollah does not put Lebanon first. Hezbollah doesn't perceive himself as a Lebanese party rather than an Iranian proxy. Iran's interests come first, and they have no clue about the political aspect of their work. Like they call themselves a political party. They have members of parliament, but yet they do not act on it. So this is the concern of most Lebanese when we read about what's happening in Vienna. Our concern is the free hand of Hezbollah on Lebanon and the lack of interest maybe of the US administration regarding Lebanon. This is the concern, and I hope that, as you said, it will not be given to Iran or to Hezbollah.
So in that regard, Rula, let me just say two things. Let's talk about the U.S. concern in this regard. But let me start off by saying we can't be more Lebanese than the Lebanese. They have to stand up and decide what they want for their country. And in that sense, the U.S. is trying very hard to show leadership in their relationship with them. They are very clear about the U.S. The elections for the parliament being held on time. They're very clear about letting Judge Bitar do his job and let the rule of law happen. they are very strong in supporting the Lebanese armed forces and the ISF in order for them to do their job to protect the sovereignty and stability of the country. They're the largest contributor of aid in the country. They're not stopping on the sanctions for those people who harbor terrorism, are corrupt, or abuse human rights. So I think the United States is actually putting together a robust strategy when it comes to helping Lebanon. And as long as the Lebanese leaders and the people of Lebanon stand up and be counted in this regard, and they are, the United States is going to be with them. What more can they do? There's more steps that the United States can take and will take, but I think it comes down to supporting the LAF, supporting civil society, supporting education and health in the country, supporting the humanitarian needs, making sure the elections are held on time and the rule of law is followed.
Talking about standing up for ourselves and against Hezbollah and their partners, because most politicians are, as you said, the same fabric, and they all, one way or another, most of them are the reason why Lebanon went collapsed the way it did. So, like, for those who are speaking out loud against Hezbollah, one of them is the patriarch. How do
Yes.
you see? How do you perceive him? How do you plan to help him out? Is he heard in Washington? Is he heard on the international scene? And how can we make him heard? Because he represents the voice of many voices at the moment, and we don't see him as a religious leader. His status as a religious leader is, protects him or gives him a platform to speak, but he is a political project. How is he perceived? Are you willing to help him? Are you willing to, invite him to Washington when the time comes? Maybe meet a few congressmen, a few senators, and let him be our envoy.
Yes. So let me address two things that you bring up, Rula. Appreciate this. One, the first part of your comment or question was about what to do with this influence that may be negative towards growth in Lebanon. Look, there's an election coming up. ATFL believes there should be a robust U.S. policy for the elections. There should be monitors. There should be funding for the civil society in order to strengthen their ability to really talk about and move reform agendas forward. We believe maybe that people who get in the way of free and fair elections, or they don't want them held on time, should be sanctioned. So we're really pressing very hard. Now, remember one thing on the elections: if Hezbollah and its allies lose 10 seats, just 10 seats, it's in the minority. It's got the blocking third, but it's in the minority. There's a real reason here for the people to turn out and vote those corrupt politicians out of office, and those politicians that don't want to help their country. So let's focus, number one, on the elections and make sure that the United States is the number one partner without getting too involved and too much involved in the election process, of course, but that they have expectations for them being free, fair, and on time. Secondly, to get to the patriarch, we met with the patriarch on our last visit there when 3 congressmen came with ATFL. We had a long talk with the patriarch, a very engaging conversation. I think it approached nearly 2 hours. We had a long talk about Iran and his views on Iran. We talked about the neutrality of the country and the importance of a neutrality position, which we agree with. And we talked about him coming back to Washington. So yes, to answer your question, we would welcome him coming to the United States because he is a great advocate for a free and fair and sovereign Lebanon. So in that sense, we would do our best to help him get meetings on the Hill and on other places where his voice could be heard. There are other religious leaders too that we plan to visit in March. We're going to come back. We're going to visit with opposition and religious leaders. And we really want to focus on really giving attention to the opposition and the opposition.
Make sure we meet in March.
Yeah, well, we hope we come back so that we can really underscore the importance of what the opposition is doing and that we're with them to get rid of corrupt politicians and people who would rather harm Lebanon for their own personal good than help their country.
How is your relationship with some of the traditional parties, such as the Lebanese forces, for instance?
Well, as you know as well, Rula, whenever we come to Beirut, ATFL tries to meet with all the political leaderships across the board. So Jaja, Jumblat, and the other political leaders we often meet with and exchange views. This time we are so focused on the really bringing a very strong and direct message to the government and what the expectations were of the United States. And we also wanted to meet with the opposition, which we met with 18 members of the opposition.
The opposition as politicians, not the civil society.
Civil society opposition. We met with 12 from civil society opposition and 6 people who are probably running for parliament. So yes, in the last meeting. But my point is we didn't have time for the political leaders and the traditional political leaders.
Which is better.
We're going to focus on
the problem that you're facing now with the lack of the financial support for the civil society as such, and the lack of unity probably, and because it's just there's still it's still a new wave. We're not yet ready for a change from within the civil society. Yes. How would you help in as ATFL the Lebanese civil society to shape its leadership? Because we're lacking leadership.
Boy, do I agree with you, Rula. One of the things we saw in our visits here with so many people was the fact that there are too many political parties almost. They need to find a way to consolidate and work together. What I found interesting, and this is a hopeful sign for Lebanon, everyone seems to agree on what the remedies are to fix the country. Everyone, the opposition, the civil society in the street, the United States, the French, its allies, the government, the well-intentioned government leaders. Everyone seems on the same page. So that's the good news. But when we go back to the opposition, and like I said, we met with 18 members of the opposition, of so-called opposition, either the street movement, more popular movement, or the more traditional opposition leaders. What we saw is a struggle to come together. Now, ATFL will not get involved in the internal politics of Lebanon. We stay away from it. We don't have any position with any party, and we will not. But we can advocate more support through the United States for civil society to empower itself, to be able to speak its voice, and to be able to do good through humanitarian and other projects, so they can show the difference between who they are in caring for their country and the old traditional guys that seem to care more about their own pocketbooks than they did about their country.
How long would you give the government of Mikati, of President Mikati? How much time does he have before his time is up?
Well, the worst thing I think we could see right now is that there's a void in government. So we have to do all we can to encourage the government to be very forward on reform agenda that meets the IMF requirements. And so we're counseling the IMF. We give them our ideas. And we also want to make sure that the government in Lebanon understands that there has to be a robust reform package coming forth. Hopefully that can happen in the next few months, surely before the elections, but some progress has to be shown, I think, in the next few months, inshallah.
Do you think the IMF, did they tell you they are hopeful? They see any change in behavior, any willingness, any,
Yes, well, Rula, let me speak for ATFL and what we see. I don't want to speak for IMF.
Okay.
But what we see, and based upon our conversations in Washington, what we're seeing is a very competent Makati government. That's the good news. Makati seems well-intentioned. He wants to do the right thing. He's got an economic staff around him that's very qualified. The deputy prime minister used to work at the IMF, and the minister of finance, minister of economy and trade. These are people that are really steeped in reform and in a reform agenda. So in that sense, you have to be hopeful. However, they've got to convince their government when a proposal goes forth that the government and the parliament will support them. And so in that sense, it kind of falls back to making sure that the Speaker of the House and the President of the Republic are in sync with the Makati proposals when they come out. And I believe I think they will come up with a good, robust plan. That's the feeling that we're getting. Inshallah, I have to have hope. But the government and the people have to be behind them at that point.
But do you think
the second most important thing, if I may say, the second most, Makati's got to make sure those elections happen on time. They have to ensure that the elections happen on time. We hear that they're going to be May 15th, but the people have to speak now. So while Makati's doing his job to hopefully, stop this terrible disaster, the people have to say enough's enough, and we're going to move in a new direction by May.
We are hoping so as well. We don't know if the parties who are like the Free Patriotic Movement will lose a lot of seats, so they're not very happy with the elections on time, as well as some other parties. And hopefully Hezbollah will no longer have the support or the majority in parliament. So I don't know how happy or how willing they are to let it happen, and how much Makati is hold the ground, against their will. So far he has been good with the judge, protecting the judge as much as he could. Let's hope that.
Well, let me say something about the judge, and let me just say, first of all, Rula, look, we're for free, fair, and timely elections, period. Let the people decide how they're going to vote, who wins, who loses. That's none of our business. I must say, though, on Judge Bitar, it's just not about him. It's about whether or not the Makati government and the Lebanese people get heard, or Hezbollah makes the decision. That's what this is about, unfortunately. And this is kind of a watershed question, I think, for a lot of people in the international community. So we're working very hard to get everyone to understand it. And like we talked about earlier, Rula, if Hezbollah really claims to be part of the political fabric of the country, they should work for improvement and reform and change to help the Lebanese people, rather than seemingly being a problem in terms of progress.
They are getting, they're getting on, they're getting more and more hardliners. Hezbollah today is not anymore holding the speech they had like 10 years ago. They're becoming openly and aggressively careless about Lebanon, and adopting whatever Iran wants. This is our problem. They used to make us believe that they were a Lebanese party. Nowadays, with their speeches, it's all about Iran, and they're not willing to give up on anything they gained within Lebanon. They want to dictate. So far, they want to dictate the foreign policy of Lebanon, and due to their action, we are kind of pushed out of the Arab League.
But the United States hears the Lebanese people. Since October 17th, they've been listening to Lebanese people. And my feeling is, and I guess I have to be hopeful, my feeling is the Lebanese people have had enough. Finally have had enough. And just talking to you and listening to you, Rula, and the other people that I talk to on a regular basis, they've had it. They've had enough. And hopefully, it will matter come election day, and they'll have a partner in the United States, which has been really quite amazing when you think about how all the United States has done, along with the French and others. I mean, think about all the problems. You know this better than anybody. The United States is so consumed with China, Russia, climate change, so many problems around the world. But yet they have a priority for Lebanon. Thank God. I think there's an advocacy in Washington now. There's a Lebanese American constituency that cares a great deal about what's going on. And the United States in this administration, Biden, sees basically strengthening Lebanon in the United States' interest. The question is, what can we do to be helpful to move that agenda forward? And I think the number of issues we've talked about this morning are all part of that agenda.
For the moment, using the stick and the carrot is helping. The sanctions are helping. So maybe you should send more sanctions, shower them with more sanctions and scare the rest with some more. If they don't obey by the rules and go on with the elections on time, and let it be, as you said, I think the UN, the US, I don't know, the Friends of Lebanon should monitor this election, because, as you said, it's very decisive. It's very important, and it might change a lot. So let's hope for that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Just the question would be, sometime, there's tension between the Israelis and Hezbollah on one hand. Iran's presence in Syria is bothering both the Russians and the Israelis and the Americans. It's bothering everyone. Do you foresee any possibility for a war between Lebanon, for instance, Hezbollah and the Israelis?
No, I think the short answer is no. When I analyze everything, neither side wants a war. However, you know what? A few mistakes and it can get out of hand. There's just too much tension. So, let me say this. Remember, the LAF has been meeting with the Israeli generals on the border every 6 weeks for a number of years now. There's a maritime border negotiation in front of the two countries. They need to close on that deal. And I think they need to find a middle ground that's in Lebanon's interest as well. And I think they will. That'll be a confidence builder, Rula, which could open the door for, maybe a land border negotiation as well. So let's take these in incremental steps now, and let's deal with what's in front of us, that maritime border negotiation. It could do a lot to answer the question or the concern you have. Having said that, I don't think anybody wants war right now.
I hope so. So that would be it. You have some questions from activists in the revolution. The first question would be from Omar Mudad.
Hello. A rumor has been spread for years that the task force is known to fund the Lebanese president Michel Aoun and his political party. How true is that rumor? And if it is true, is the task force still financing the Free Patriotic Movement today?
Thank you, Omar. I appreciate the question. I can tell you this, nothing is further from the truth than that statement. We not only don't support the FPM, we don't support any political party in Lebanon. We're not a front for anybody. The organization was founded by Americans of Lebanese ancestry. For instance, when I joined the organization, I was 44 years old before I even saw Lebanon. So we have a different view of Lebanon. We believe in a whole of Lebanon. We believe that there's a chance for it to be its own national cause rather than the cause of political parties or tribal affiliations. We don't see it that way. We didn't grow up that way. Most of us work for free. And just to give you background on ATFL. So the ATFL not only, it's not in our DNA to even want to support political parties there. There are other groups in America that do support political parties in Lebanon. ATFL is not one of them and will never be one of them. We're multi-confessional. Shia, Sunni, Druze, Greek Orthodox, Maronite, Melkite. The list goes on and on and on. And so we're very proud of that. We're the only multi-confessional organization in America. So rest assured that we care about making sure that Lebanon addresses the needs of the people, which is represented by many in the opposition party. And we are doing all we can to see that new opposition people can lead their country and be supportive of them in general.
I confirm what you said, because I saw it firsthand. The second question, Diana Khaddar.
As task force, you have been strongly campaigning the upcoming Lebanese elections and insisting on expatriates to register to vote. My question is, why didn't you launch a campaign instead on the importance of disarming Hezbollah and freeing Lebanon from the Iranian occupation?
Thank you, Deanna. Two parts to this question. One is, as I think you heard when I was talking earlier, we care a great deal about making sure that the Lebanese people decide its fate for itself without the influence of other outside interests such as Iran. And we are very clear, I think, earlier in saying to you that we look for ways to strengthen Lebanese institutions so that it can push back on any party or any group that goes against the fabric of the nation and its reform agenda. So in that sense, I think we've shown our very true nature in fighting for ensuring that Hezbollah is not strengthened in this process. We talked earlier about Iran and how difficult the negotiations between the United States and Iran is right now, and how ATFL is totally focused on that. We really want to make sure that in any deal between Iran and the United States, that Lebanon is not hurt by it, and to the extent possible is strengthened as a result of it. But we also care about the elections and we care about the people. And so I believe we need to have a multifaceted agenda. So it's not either or, in my opinion, it's both. So in that sense, I agree with you.
The first question from Yara Salem, please.
We have noticed that throughout your visits to Lebanon, you have been meeting with politicians and representatives of the current unwanted and corrupt government. My question for you today is, Don't you think, in your opinion, it would be more constructive if you met with representatives from the civic movements instead? There are many independent groups who emerged during the revolution and who resemble the people's needs and identity way more than our current government. As a television born from the womb of the Lebanese People's Uprising, we would be more than happy to guide you towards these groups and towards people who are open for discussion. So I hope that in case the reason was that you didn't know where to resort to, I hope that now you know that you have TV17, an independent media platform born from the Lebanese People's Uprising, where you can have these connections.
Yara, that's a great comment. I'd like your email so that we can be in touch with you, but let me comment. On our last visit here, you'll recall we brought 3 members of the United States Congress, and it was on purpose that we came with a very specific message. And that was a very hardline message by the United States that they better act in the interest of the people because America was watching, that they better understand that Judge Bitar should do his job, and that some of the reform agenda has to go forward. So there was a very specific reason for doing that. However, in that meeting, Yara, in that visit, I should say, we met with 18 opposition leaders, 6 from more of the traditional opposition, and 12 from the more popular street movement, civil society. So we did meet with 18 representatives of the opposition. Now, I do want to agree with you, though. I think we want to make sure in our next meeting, and that's why I want to talk to you, and I appreciate your question. We want to come in March. We want to meet solely because we won't be with United States government officials. We want to meet solely with opposition leaders, civil society leaders, and others who are moving their country in the right direction. We also think that it'll be important to meet with religious leaders as well, which we hadn't had the chance to do other than the patriarch on the last trip. So yes, I do want to do that. We do want to do it in March. We had a specific reason in November. And by the way, I think we accomplished the goal. We have moved some agendas forward, and they now know that we speak with one voice in America. The Lebanese Americans speak with one voice on behalf of their country. But in the next meeting, we definitely want to meet with the opposition candidates, and I'd love to work with you. And by the way, the other groups that we've met with last month, which were very helpful to us, I should say.
Next trip, we will have TV17 host a big meeting for you with the biggest number of activists, hopefully.
I accept.
All right, deal done. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you're doing. We will be in touch again, and keep us in your thoughts and your efforts and your daily work.
Rula, thank you. Rula, thank you so much for all that you've done for your country, and appreciate the friendship over the years, but also thank you to the Lebanese people, and especially the opposition folks who are working so hard to make their country a
better place.
And hopefully we will be partners with you and with them. So thank you very much.
We will rise back. I'm sure Lebanon will rise back. It will take some time, but we will win. We will prevail. Thank you so much. Have a happy New Year.
Thanks, Rula. All right, thank you all at TV17. Appreciate it. We'll see you in March.
See you in March. Bye.
Take care.